So welcome to Urgent Health Message. We're going to look today at 6 pandemics which will probably wipe us out in the next generation or two. Forget global warming, here's a diversion, okay? It's small potatoes. This is the stuff that's going to kill us. And I'm going to show you how to survive. So 6 pandemics now, current, okay? 6 pandemics that are going on now in the world. Will you survive? So first of all, a pandemic of stupidity, okay, caused by iodine deficiency and fluoride poisoning. So in 1950, let me just say here, I'm going to give you nothing but facts, okay? You can make your own conspiracy theories out of the facts. So this is DIY conspiracy theory. I'm not going to get into any of that. But what I will say is, there's a YouTube video, Big Pharma owns the media, and that's a lawyer who did a study, and he found that on every big drug company's board of directors, there's one director who is also on media company's board of directors. Every media company except CBS. And you can, that's in the US, of course, but you can extrapolate that to the UK, France, Germany, Switzerland, Australia, New Zealand. It's the same everywhere. And I would also say, in addition to that, if you look on the board of every big drug company, you're going to find, number one, somebody with, who's associated with the Rockefellers. So that board director will either be on the Rockefeller Family Trust or working for the Rockefeller Foundation or on the Council for Foreign Affairs, something like that, yeah? And there will also be a board member who is from Goldman Sachs, okay? So we're going to find some, all the way through here, we're going to see Rockefeller, we're going to find, okay? Like I say, I'm going to give you facts. You make up your own conspiracy theories. So, a pandemic of stupidity, iodine deficiency. Now, in 1948, there was a bogus study which purports to say that supplementing with iodine will harm the thyroid. The thyroid is a gland just here, and I have to declare an interest here, actually, because for about 12 years, I had quite a big goiter here. A goiter is a swelling on the thyroid gland. When the thyroid gland it's not working properly, it starts to, the cells start to swell and you get a swelling, you get a nodule on the thyroid. My goiter was benign. So gradually, and I went to the doctors, didn't know what it was, they couldn't help me. Gradually I put the pieces together, and over the years, for about the last, 12 years, with every meal, I eat miso soup, which I make with kombu, which is kelp, Japanese kelp, and that's got lots of iodine in it. So gradually the goiter has subsided, and also I think I was vitamin D deficient for about 10 years, quite bad vitamin D deficiency, and that will affect your thyroid as well. So nowadays I still eat miso soup at every meal, and I also supplement with iodine. I take 4 drops of Lugol's iodine in water in the morning every day. Now, I have to say at this point, one thing I must stress, do not supplement with tincture of iodine. It's a poison, okay? So do not do that. And I'm only giving you an outline here, so we'll get into the detail here later on. but I'm only giving you an outline. So if you want to know about iodine, read books by Dr. Brownstein, and also you can look up G.E. Abrams online, and buy a book called The Iodine Crisis, which is very good. So don't supplement with iodine until you've read those, so that you know what you're doing. But anyway, iodine deficiency, there was a bogus study in 1948, so just after the war. Some doctors, it's called the Wolf-Chaim effect. These two doctors, they say they gave iodine to rats, and the rats developed goiters. Well, ever since then, it's taught in medical school that supplementing with iodine will harm your thyroid. Before that, for about 100 years before that, if you had hypothyroid, which is underactive thyroid, or hyperthyroid, which is overactive thyroid, the doctor would give you, would tell you to supplement with Lugol's iodine. Lugol was a French chemist who developed a kind of form of iodine which you can safely take. Otherwise, it can be poison if you take the wrong kind of iodine. So iodine deficiency. Now, iodine is in the soil, and plants, you get iodine in the soil, iodine in vegetables and fruits, iodine in humans. No iodine in the soil, no iodine in the vegetables and fruits, no iodine in the humans, okay? And there are parts of the US where there's no iodine in the soil. It's called the goiter belt. Now, there have been studies done in all over the place where they've measured how much iodine a population had and the IQ of their children, of their offspring, where the mother was iodine deficient and the child had very little iodine growing up. Generally, there's about the child has about 10 IQ points less than a child who would have enough iodine. Fluoride, this was in 1948. So this study has been debunked by G.E. Abrams, who was a professor of endocrinology in California. Fluoride poisoning, around that time, in 1950, they started to add fluoride to drinking water. Fluoride is supposed to be good for your teeth and stop you getting cavities, okay? Now, at that time, when exactly the time they started adding it to water, there was a study which showed that the effect of fluoride on the teeth is topical and not systemic, okay? So what that means is the fluoride to work and stop you getting cavities, it has to be in your saliva. If you drink, the fluoride you ingest has nothing to do with it, okay? So that was in 1950, there was a first study which showed that the effect is topical, not cumulative. There have been a load of studies since which prove it's topical, not systemic. But they still add it to water. In the area where I live, Warwickshire, it's added to water. Again, there have been studies which show the effect of too much fluoride in the water has the effect of lowering the IQ of your offspring by about 10 points. How they've done that, they've done studies in India, in Iran, in Mexico, where people get their water from groundwater, they get it from wells. And all they have to do is to find populations. So you've got one village next to another. One village will have a lot of fluoride, natural fluoride in the water, not added, just natural heavy amount of fluoride. And the neighboring village might have a lot less fluoride, a lot less natural fluoride in the water, from their wells. So these populations will have the same diet, everything else the same culture, same ethnicity, and they will measure the amount of fluoride in the water and measure the IQ of children. And they can extrapolate from that if you have too much fluoride, your children will have an IQ of about 10 IQ points less. So iodine deficiency, you're losing 10 IQ points. Fluoride poisoning, you're losing 10 IQ points. So if you've got a double whammy, if you've got both, how many IQ points are you losing? I mean, it's serious, right? And this has been done since 1950. We have a severe iodine deficiency. Iodine is added to salt. So if they didn't add it to salt, it's mandatory. It has to be added to salt. If they didn't do that, we would all have goiters. Okay, it's just enough to prevent us from having goiters. In France, Germany, Switzerland, they don't add the fluoride to water. They add it to salt. Okay, they add fluoride to salt. They add iodine to salt, but they also, in France, Germany, and Switzerland, they also add fluoride to salt. So iodine in salt, kind of a good thing. Fluoride in salt, disaster. Okay, so this started in 1950. So that's my grandchildren's generation. The effect is cumulative. So IQ, how much IQ is hereditary, we don't really know. There's a debate, nature versus nurture. But pretty sure that a lot of IQ is inherited. So 3 generations, each generation losing 10 IQ points. That's at least 30 IQ points lost since my generation. How long can this go on? Another couple of generations, everyone will be imbeciles, okay? So 20, 30 IQ points lost, that takes you from average intelligence to being a cretin, okay? Or from high intelligence to average intelligence. So we can't afford for this to go on. Here's what Dr. Brownstein says, okay? Dr. Brownstein is an expert on iodine. He gives his patients, he supplements his patients with iodine and gets great results. And he's a disciple of Abraham's. So here's what he says. Iodine deficiency is occurring at epidemic rates. The US government statistics from NHANES show that almost 60% of pregnancy-aged women are suffering from inadequate iodine intake. Iodine deficiency should be considered a national emergency. Over the last 40 years, iodine deficiency has been exacerbated due to our increasing exposure to bromine, chloride, and fluorine that competitively inhibit and compete with iodine in the body. We are suffering with the consequences of iodine deficiency, including autoimmune thyroid disorders. Okay, so if you don't get enough, your thyroid is the master gland. Okay, if you don't have enough, if you've got an underactive thyroid, you get fat, you've got no energy, you've got brain fog, your skin gets puffy, it's a disaster. You can also be hyperthyroid, and that's not good either. Okay, so that's that. Okay, over here, iodine crisis. So I will be going into that in depth, yeah? All these things here, I will go into depth, but this is just an outline. So, denatured food, okay? I'm not talking about processed food here, okay? I'm talking about food that someone like me, a health nut, eats. I can't get proper food. In the UK, I cannot trust the food. I cannot trust the fruit and vegetables. I cannot trust the rice. I cannot trust the pulses, okay? They're messing about with the food. So we're not talking about processed food here. I mean, if you eat, if you just subsist on bags of crisps and Coca-Cola, I'm sorry, I can't really do much for you, okay? So this video is for fairly intelligent people, yeah? Denatured food. What do I mean by denatured food? So we've got GM foods, and we've got polluted foods. Yeah, irradiated foods up here, yeah? Okay, so irradiation. According to the FDA, the US Federal Drug Administration, according to the WHO, World Health Organization, according to the UK Food Standards Agency, and probably all the other agencies in all the other countries, irradiated food is the best thing since sliced bread. It kills bacteria. It's supposed to kill microbes in the food, okay? So it keeps food fresher for longer. But this is not true. I mean, it's true. It might be true that it keeps the food fresher for longer, but it's a disaster from the nutrient point of view. It creates harmful chemicals in the food. It lowers the vitamin content. We're going to go into this in detail later on, okay? So, denatured food, GM foods, a study in France, Monsanto, now owned by Bayer, they did a study on rats for 3 months where they fed, I think it was GM corn, was it corn? GM corn, to the rats for 3 months. And on the basis of that study, they got regulatory approval from the European Union, now called the European Community. They keep changing the name. But a French professor in Caen, in France, he got hold of the study that Monsanto had done, and he copied the study exactly, except that he fed the rats for a year instead of just 3 months, and the rats developed terrible tumours, okay? So hopefully that study will kill. Ex-French Minister of Health said that the study was a bomb, okay? So hopefully that's going to kill GM foods. But anyway, we'll get onto that in detail further on. So fluoride poisoning, we've already covered that. Iodine deficiency, we've already covered that. Vitamin D deficiency. Now, we're told not to go out in the sun. If you go on the NHS website, they will tell you, oh, don't go out in the sun, you're going to get cancer. Nothing about supplementing with vitamin D, nothing about the vitamin D pandemic. I can guarantee that just about 98% of the UK population are severely vitamin D deficient, okay? Now, we're told not to go out in the sun because we'll get cancer. But give me a break, okay? I mean, just common sense tells us that's rubbish. The first modern, our ancestors, the first modern humans, came out of Africa around 60,000 years ago, okay? We started eating a modern diet, modern in inverted commas, meaning bread, eating meat from domesticated animals, cooking food, around 10,000 years ago in the Middle East, about 5,000 years ago in Europe. So that means for 50,000 years, our cavemen ancestors were spending all day foraging for food. So they would have been out in the sun all day looking for food and then eating it, okay? So they would have been moving around in the landscape all the time. They would have had a nomadic existence. We have evolved in the sun. So if it were true that the sun gives you cancer, we would be extinct. Our ancestors would have died from cancers. They would all have died from melanoma. It's rubbish, okay? Having said that, you need to be careful, okay? What gives you skin cancer is not being used to the sun, going out and then going out in the sun all day and getting burnt, okay, that might give you skin cancer, okay? So we'll be covering that. So just be careful. I'm not giving you health advice here, yeah? We'll cover this later on in detail. We'll cover vitamin D deficiency, and we'll have a look at the studies, and those will back up what I'm saying here, yeah? The studies prove that vitamin D will stop you getting skin cancer, okay? If you have sensible sun exposure, or you use a tanning salon sensibly. So we're talking about sensible exposure to ultraviolet rays, okay? Sensible exposure. So like I said, I'm not giving you health advice here. We'll get into this later on. If you want to learn about vitamin D, read Dr. Hollick's book. Dr. Hollick is the expert, okay? So read his book, and that will tell you all about it. Medical blunders, hoaxes, and dogma. We'll get on to that. Medical propaganda and misinformation. So these two go together, really. But just a word about that. A doctor at Johns Hopkins Medical School. Johns Hopkins is the top medical school in the US, okay? All the other schools were modeled on it. It was a model for all the US medical schools in around 1914. So when they were all, when the Rockefellers set up their foundation and funded all the medical schools. So a doctor at Johns Hopkins did a study in the US. He found that medical errors were the number 3 cause of death. So number 1 cause of death is cancer, with just over 6,000. Sorry, the number 1 cause of death is heart disease. Sorry about that. So death from heart disease, so heart attacks. So just over 6,000. The next number 2 cause of death is cancer, with again just over 6,000, just a few less than heart disease. Third cause of death is medical blunders. Now, only 250,000 can be ascribed properly to medical blunders. And the reason for that is that the reason it's not more, according to this, the guy who did the study, is the lack of detail on death certificates. So he could only be sure that in 250,000 cases, it was definitely due to medical blunders. But he thinks it's about 440,000. The true figure is 440,000, okay? Now, how many of the people who died of heart attacks or cancer died because they had a history of taking drugs? You know, maybe the drugs caused the cancer, maybe the drugs caused the heart attack, okay? So I'm going into territory where I shouldn't go there because I can't substantiate that. But anyway, the report defines medical error as one that is caused by inadequately skilled staff, error in judgment or care, a system defect, or a preventable adverse effect. This includes computer breakdowns, mix-ups with the doses or types of medications administered to patients, and surgical complications that go undiagnosed. So the real number is thought to be 440,000 or higher. So probably as many people are killed by cancer or heart disease, as many are probably killed by medical blunders, okay? So now we'll get on to 4 pandemics in history. We've got 6 pandemics now that are going on. So let's look at 4 pandemics in history. Maybe we can learn something from them, okay?